Do you hear that? That's the sound of an Arctic chill blowing across the Midwest.
Welcome back to Joint Discussions. I'm Lauren Wild. I'm one of the co-hosts with James Mummert.
Hey, baby girl, we are all bundled up in this garage right now. We are doing episode number 15 from the Libra Loft, but it's more like there's no loft in here.
No.
There's never really been a loft, but also it is really fucking cold outside. We have listeners all across the United States and in some countries. And so some of you may not understand the Arctic chill that actually really is happening. We're talking about temperatures that are getting up into single digits or low teens, but the feels like is in the negatives. And when you are recording in a yet to be finished space with one space heater, it is cold. So we are bundled up. We actually have coats and gloves and toboggans and blankets and everything, but here and emotional support stuffies. And we are here for another episode. Babe, how are you dealing with in this cold? Because you're from Florida. You've lived in Ohio for a couple of decades now, but your upbringing was in a little bit more sun and warmth than this.
A little bit. Yeah. I mean, a lot. But so I'm coming up on almost 2 decades of living in Ohio. So I was raised in Florida. Spent the majority of my life in Florida, but at this point, I've actually spent more time in Ohio than I did where I grew up, which is pretty crazy.
But it hasn't made you any more acclimated to the freezing cold weather.
Okay, so I feel like I am more acclimated temperature-wise somewhat. Like mentally, I'm like prepared because I've done all of this like emotional work, and that's where like learning the Wheel of the Year when I got into the world of witchery and everything was actually one of the best things I ever did because it made meaning of every season. Even the freezing cold, bleak seasons had some sort of purpose, and that helped me mentally and emotionally a lot. But physically, I'm always freezing. Always.
That is evidenced by our heating bill and other things, but that is, 'tis the season, right? 'Tis the season. We are squarely in the month of December. Christmas, the end of the year, all of these things are starting to come up. And again, we're in the Midwest. We have snow on the ground. We got dumped about 6-7 inches. Oh my God, I need to stop doing that shit. But truly, it actually was 6 to 7 inches of snow that came down. Maybe that was Mother Nature's way of saying, I'm the mean bitch. But we have that on the ground. Schools have been closed, actually, not because of snow, but because of the freezing cold.
Yeah.
And the reality is we still may not have a white Christmas. Yeah. We have temperatures that are going to get up near 50 at the end of this week. And so that's like your welcome to the Midwest. Yeah. One day it's a blizzard. The next day it's an Arctic negatives. And then the next day you're wearing shorts because it's raining and warm.
Yeah. No, it's all over the place with Ohio. It's not like we're up, even 30 minutes north where you're above 70 and it's pretty consistently like freezing and they get consistent snow. But we're in Southwest Ohio. We're not too far from Kentucky. So to give anybody any frame of reference.
Yeah, we're not like in the Lake Erie snow area where like Buffalo or Cleveland or some of those other miserable cities are.
Yeah.
But we're definitely feeling it. But like I said, snow and some of that other stuff brings about the conscious like, oh, holidays are here.
Yeah, totally. And we were like, I'm obsessed with the Weather Channel. For those of you guys that don't know, I grew up in Florida. My house was destroyed by a hurricane when I was 10, and then my other house got destroyed by a hurricane when I was 18. So like, I'm kind of obsessed with the Weather Channel. And yesterday when I was listening, they were calling it the misery indexed. And I had never heard that before, like what it takes to be on the misery index and how much snow and ice and how cold it has to be. But I was just like, that's a new terminology. So yeah, my misery index is pretty high right now.
I bet the misery index came from some like meteorologist who wanted to make their mark and said, we got like the barometric pressure and we got the precipitation, but I'm going to come up and we got heat index, but I got something brand new for everybody.
The misery
index. Well, if you've looked around the state of the fucking world right now, there's a lot of goddamn misery going around.
Really
so I think the misery index for a lot of people, weather independent, is pretty high. I think as we are talking about the misery index, if you were to poll people when it comes to the most stressful times or the most miserable times of the year to interact with either estranged family or family that you don't see eye to eye with, holidays would most likely top that list. And there's really no bigger holiday capitalist wise in this country than Christmas, which we are knocking on the doorsteps of.
It's funny because my feed, my algorithm is basically like a large part of energetics, and then the other part is psychoanalysis. So I have so many like memes that are coming across my algorithm right now that are like therapists preparing for Christmas week, like the week after Christmas. And it's like all of these pictures of people like going into battle and like preparing for the worst because you get a lot of like re-triggers and things kind of spiral back out and you think you've made so much forward movement and the regression comes after you have to deal with like tons of family that you thought that you could just like kind of ignore or get past, but it like gets all brought up in your face again, one way or the other around the holidays.
But you're so right. Therapists are really actually having to gear up because they are going to be met with so many, this is what happened during the holidays. Like I wanted it to do X, but Y happened and Z was the outcome.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh my God. And it is a time where holidays bring up things for people, even outside of just like the relationships with one another. Like the actual holiday itself is a dynamic in and of itself.
Yeah, I think that it has an enormous amount of tradition, no matter what your ancestral lens is that the solstices, which are the peak of dark and the peak of light in a calendar year, always have some sort of meaning to them. Like that's just kind of woven into our ancestral way of being, which was we're heading into the longest night of the year. And then in the Southern Hemisphere, they're heading into the longest day of the year, but they shift and then they move towards the other direction. So it was like also a time of hope, like when you could almost sense that like there is light at the end of the tunnel. But it's like where the whole idea of like the darkest before the dawn comes from is what happens at Yule, which is at Christmas.
It's really interesting how you framed it though. Like just when you said it to me, you said that it's the longest night. And many people phrase it as this is the shortest day of the year that we will have. Obviously, they are the same thing in, I guess, reality, but the way it's phrased, is there a certain way why you said that it's the longest period of darkness?
Yeah, because there's a difference between having the longest day of the year and the longest night of the year, because whatever it is, dark or light, precedes, the kind of the celebration or the point. So, for example, if we looked at summer solstice, where they're having the longest day of the year, they're in their peak celebration of agricultural year. Like they've planted everything, now it's just growing. Whereas the people that are heading into the longest night of the year know that it's kind of touched with like freezing cold and there's nothing new in the ground, and it's meant to represent a returning of hope and light. And it's something I talk about a lot in my line of work because so many, and maybe it would be good to talk about briefly here because of the amount of people that have deconstructed, but that is, before everything was colonized by Christianity or Abrahamic faiths, there were indigenous belief systems everywhere. And it doesn't matter where you look, what cultural lens, what part of the world, they all learn to value everything by where the sun was in the sky, because where the sun is where you can grow food. And now we live in modern times, we can go to the grocery store. But before we were where we are now, they didn't have an enormous store of food. They didn't have light. They had candles, and they only had a certain amount of calories that they could ration a day because there wasn't going to be any other food. So it was a time period where it was like, just hold out hope, like the sun is returning. And then the other side is like, celebrate, like be merry, eat, drink, be merry, because, the dark is returning. So it was like a survival mindset.
I guess it's just that I feel here in Ohio and in this part of the country, that don't mean shit because the most miserable winter night days are ahead of us.
Yeah.
So we can't say something like, oh yeah, this has been the coldest it's going to be. And no.
Yeah, that's part of why I love earth-centered or indigenous traditions, is because it teaches you the power of the in-between moments. So that's why they say faith is an evolutionary process for humanity and how we developed, is because they knew it was awful, and we don't even know how awful it could be. Like, they were in the elements. We have so much shelter from it. We have homes, we have heat, if you're lucky, that we don't even experience it the way they did. And so for them, it was like, there's a meaning in the misery, and we're able to get to, if we can just get to spring, then we'll survive. So it was, again, like I said, it was an evolutionary mindset.
That's a good back piece and something that can certainly be a future episode in and of itself.
Sure.
But again, kind of getting us back on the track of this episode is discussing how relationships can play out during holiday times. And I think maybe I'd be willing to share kind of what sparked some of this conversation for us to have this episode.
Yeah.
Because I'm kind of going through that in some ways, and ways that are ongoing, but are kind of interesting and related to this topic.
Yeah. So when I think about that quote, I tend to think about, like, we perceive that we've done so much work, and obviously we have, but it's so crazy how certain things from the past can get brought back up almost like they're brand new. They're fresh all over again, which I'm sure would fall into the category of being triggered. But we've been working on trying to figure out where we stand with some of the relationships, especially in your biological family, babe, that we wanted to bring in to the conversation, because we felt like maybe you guys might need to either be seen and witnessed because you've got similar things going on, and then also you might seek some of the ideas that we're trying to work with as well.
Sure. And if you are a previous listener of our episodes, you will know that there is some situations going on between my parents and I that have created a no contact stance. But I do have two siblings. Mm-hmm. I have a brother who's a couple years younger than me, and then I have a sister who's about a dozen years younger than me. The relationship that we're talking about tonight is one with my brother. Yeah. We just a quick 1 minute elevator summary of where we were. We grew up very competitive. He was always in my shadow, with me being 2 years older. He was always James's brother. Mm-hmm. We were very competitive in everything. We fought all the time. We couldn't stand each other as teenagers. I left for college. Our relationship changed. We were able to actually have deeper conversations and understand that we are family. We are brothers. Got married together, did a lot of the things in the faith circles. And then once I left faith, that kind of started the tear, and then it continued to get pulled going through the divorce. And we got to a point where we just don't talk very much. During Thanksgiving time, I had texted him because I knew he would be at my parents' house, and said, hey, you guys are welcome to come over and meet Lauren and the kids if you'd like. And he sent back a very long response, basically saying, no, we're good. There's just so many questions. You're coming out this with a text, what? He wanted more explanation. So we finally were able to set up a call.
Yeah. It was good, and I was proud of you for moving through that. But what was really interesting is how much it was like going back and talking to people that are trying to talk you back into your faith. And there's just this genuine lack of understanding where you're just trying to be seen and understood, but they're so committed to what they believe that they cannot, like there's just such a limit of consciousness and awareness that they can't get to you. And that's just what I perceived by listening, because his entire worldview, his entire lens on life is defined by the Bible and how he perceives the Bible and how he was raised to believe the Bible. And for him, it turned out to be that he was really afraid about bringing his family into our home for a couple of different reasons, but especially because you have a witch for a partner.
Yeah, that was very clear. And it made so much sense of why they didn't come over on Thanksgiving. He did not want demonic presences to affect his family. And we're trying not to laugh, but
I know.
And I respect his beliefs, okay? Like I do. Do I think they're insane? Yes. But I respect those views, but his views were very like it was in a bubble. He had one definition of witch, and he actually did explain some of that, because at some point I brought you into the conversation. Yeah. He was like, I hear I'm on speaker. I assume that Lauren's been listening this entire time. And I said, oh yeah, the last 20 minutes or so. Yeah. And so then I said, hey, is it okay if we bring Lauren in? Like you have questions about her, so who better to answer than herself?
Yeah, this was, and anybody listening that could be in any part of this situation, like even if you, particularly the brother, listen, like, hey, we're not meaning to be disrespectful. It's more of just like the lens and the processing of the different ways of experiencing these misunderstandings. So I think the first thing is I have lived in the place of trying to explain things to evangelical Christians that are unwilling to have any other perspective because they're afraid, because that's the work that I rised up into, was defending other people's perspectives and opinions. And like such a big part of it is they don't realize they're in a prison. Just like I didn't realize that I was in a prison when I was an evangelical Christian. You didn't realize you were in a prison. We had spontaneous spiritual awakenings. It shook our faith in a way that we were able to see. It's like if you broke a mirror, you now have like 7 different fragments that if you look in each one of those different mirrors, it's going to show you a different reflection. That's what happens when you have these awakenings. So they can't see. They can't see, and they have to be brave. And it all goes back to the story of the snake and eating the apple for information and then blah, 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 blah. But they can't go past their limits because they're afraid that it's going to let the devil in, that it's going to, tamper with their family or
it's going to upset God.
Yeah, or it's going to upset God, that like they're just in the perfect mind prison, and that's where I'm always like, man, where is your acts of faith? Like you have this God that you believe is going to protect you and all those things. And if you look at Jesus, he was sitting amongst the quote unquote sinners you're so afraid of. Like where are you doing mission related work when you're sitting with people who mirror and echo your faith the exact same way as you do?
Yeah, you are really just putting up walls against everything that's not like you. That is not who the Jesus was, for one. But again, like you said, yeah, if you believe and have the faith that you say you do about God and the protection and the oversight and everything like that, then having a relationship or stepping into a home of a family member who lives with somebody who even practices witchcraft, the version of that you thought it was, well, then your God should be able to have protected you and guided you through that. But in the lens that he is seeing it through, he sees it through one lens only, and that lens precludes anything that's not God ordained, which is defined from the version of the Bible that he was raised and believes. So that's the crux of it. Yep. But I mean, I miss my brother.
Yeah.
I miss my sister. I want to have relationships with them, but I don't want to have relationships that it's interesting because my brother and I have spoken a little bit about like what type of relationship did we want, and we had that in that conversation as well.
Yeah. I mean, I think that this is a multidimensional conversation in general, and it really always boils down to what is the outcome that you want? And that's where you really got to decide when you think about this conversation as to how might it apply to me is the holidays you might be confronted with people, family members even, or, estranged family members that are off-putting or look down on you because you don't have the same faith or belief or discount, your presence. And it makes me think of that situation, that we talked about with the adoption situation, where they devalue your essence and your presence because you are not, quote unquote, like ordained by God because you're out of faith or whatever that bullshit is. What you have to ask yourself is like, what do I really want out of this? Do I want to have a close relationship with someone that's going to require me to have to leave my entire self at the door to be in relationship with them? Or like, is there something that we can maintain that we both like? Is there sports? So our relationship is down to a sports relationship. We're down to birthdays and holidays. We don't talk about politics. We don't talk about religion. We just focus on the kids. And that's a lot of what he and I talked about, which is like, I'm not going to play like there's an elephant in the room. Yes, I identify as a witch. It is different than what you've been told. I appreciate your bravery to even want to talk to me about it. But bro, listen, I was trained in demonic warfare. I studied all of the Battlefield of the Mind by Joyce Meyer books. I was like her biggest fan. And I know what you're probably coming up against fear-wise. And the thing is that you have to be willing to confront and ask those questions to people and be willing to stick around to listen. And he was. That's the thing. I was super proud of him. He was. But at the end of the day, so much of it was not necessarily compromise. It was more of like, well, what will fit because I'm not going to change and you're not going to change. So what are we left with? And ultimately, I think that that's where we're really trying to get is that, number one, naming the fact that there is a clear belief and perspective difference because of levels of consciousness. Like, they can't see beyond their bubble because they are literally trained to be fearful to look outside the bubble. And that story is not brand new. That story is as old as Adam and Eve and the serpent and the Garden of Eden story. But like, where do you want, like, what kind of relationship do you want with this person is really where you have to start, in my opinion.
That was part of the conversation too that I wanted to define, and it was interesting in some of the responses because, yes, I know that it's going to be impossible to have very deep conversations with him ever again because of our differences now. Or as you put it, streams of consciousness or levels of consciousness. But what I wanted is that kind of, hey, we have a common bond over a few things that still keep us in communication with one another. And I have 3 nephews and nieces that live there that I shouldn't lose because of the divorce or the strain. And it was an interesting thing because he said, yeah, my youngest still asks for you all the time.
That's so hard.
And I want that. I want that relationship, but I don't want it where I have to tone down the essence of who I am now in order to meet the family standards of what version of Uncle Jay they get.
Yeah, I feel you on that. And it's just hard because, again, the thing that you have to have in order to make this work is at least curiosity. You have to at least be curious. And when you have a religion that tells you curiosity could possibly be a lion prowling around, wait to devour you, if we allow ourselves to be conscious to the fact that they're bound, that they're in a prison of their mind, allows you to have a little bit more compassion. It doesn't fix things necessarily, but it does allow you to have a little bit more compassion, because we were in that mental prison too. But it doesn't change. And what I sense is, how do we evolve our relationship and being able to grieve the connection that once existed and will never be the same again?
Yeah, I wanted that familial, like, check in with the kids. How are they doing? And he defined that as only something that could occur if we were deep level. That was the difference between that I thought was very interesting. I wanted, like, I'm cool with a surface level, like, brotherly relationship that's just like checking in and hearing updates on the kids and stuff. And he said that wasn't available unless it was I really want to go deep and talk about really deep things, but that always leads to the same answer over and over again.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's like, so one of the things that creates the separation from a conscious perspective is when you live in a way where fear is the center of your belief, which is what happens in control-based religions. Christianity is one of them. Is you're taught not to think beyond the binary of yes or no or good or bad.
Yeah, and doubt is something that I championed for as a Christian, because I was like, yeah, doubt is something that is going to strengthen my faith until the doubt and the reason turned and teamed up with one another, jumped off the top rope and just bashed faith with a people's elbow. But doubt is something that, which is curiosity. Like, you could use those as synonyms, and that's what I need for things to move forward.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you just don't know if that's what you're going to get. You can't make somebody do it.
No.
So if that's the case, then you start to talk about the accepting of what reality might look like for you during holiday times, during birthdays, anniversaries, wedding days, things like that.
I want to come back to the binary of thought for just one more moment. And that is not, I mean, I've already talked to you about this, but for listeners, and that is, the thing about it is that these high control belief systems want to have control over the binary, because when you gain awareness and consciousness and you have, you know, what they might call like a divergent mindset, it creates these chinks in their way of keeping you stuck. It allows what's called the spectrum to start to build. So when you move from yes or no, black or white, good, bad, when you start to ask questions, it evolves your consciousness. And then you start to find that you can have a and or, a but and. Like, you all of a sudden are able to hold two perspectives where you hear yourself saying, I hear you and I respect that, but blah, 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 blah. So the more that you're able to hold your own opinion but have space for somebody else's opinion, the more that actually continues to grow your consciousness, and it creates the ability to hold more than one thought or opinion at the same time. They don't have those skills, and their own belief system weaponizes them to gain that, because it is reinforced with threat and fear of death, a fiery hell, or something awful happening to their family if they let something like that in.
So what I basically heard you say is, I think of like the Matrix with the red pill and blue pill.
Yeah.
And you can actually realize that you can have both pills and still be, you know, it's not such a this or that. It is, there's this, that one too, this one as well, this one as well. And we can all coexist while still having some of the same things. It's just a simple rewiring of the system, as so to say, or like a version update, like an installation update of your phone software. Now it's an installation update of your relationship software. It's running through and saying, okay, we've made a lot of improvements to this version of the software. Do you accept the changes?
Yeah. I've been using that exact thing with the upgrade, because so many people have phones that are too old to do the new Safari 26 update, that I've been using that a lot, where it's like you can only go so far on an update without having to get something brand new. And that brand new thing is scary, but that's what you have to do because you can't go any further on this software. You've hit your limit. And that's the thing about the evolution. When you change yourself and you change your beliefs, you aren't fully prepared that a lot of your relationships can reflect that change and it will never be the same again. And that's why we have to grieve the end of relationships that can't operate the same way that they did. And that's why, again, coming back to being able to understand, like, what do I want from this? Which would be like, I want to create some sort of new relationship that is founded on this, because that's never going to happen again. But that requires a lot of radical acceptance.
I think of it as like a plant, the plant of a relationship. So let's just say a sibling relationship, for instance, and it's in a pot and it's been watered by this belief system, by this upbringing, by all of these things over the years. Well, obviously it died at a certain point when the plant split and one person didn't need the watering of, didn't use water of religion or whatever it is, insert whatever it is for your life, as the growing source. So now I found a new life source or growing source that I want to plant in my own new pot, a relationship with a sibling. It's just a matter of, yeah, like you said, do you agree on the basic rules of our life source of this relationship? Do we have the water of the relationship that's going to make this plant sustain at least? You need light and you need water. We have those things, but do we agree on what those things are actually defined as? Yeah,
and I would even go as far to utilize in your parable soil, because you do, in fact, come from an environment that has the same soil, but your soil is a different composition now, if you will, than his. And trying to figure out, like, we could still keep growing in here, but like it might look different. Again, it all boils down to, like, we can't make people meet us in relationship. We can't make people grow with us. It's a core part of the, like, spiritual awakening, personal evolution situation, is that there is so much grief and gratitude when it comes to, like, I'm finally living a life that's aligned with who I am. I'm authentic. I'm seen and known for who I am. But then there's also almost equal amount of joy and grief for everything you had to leave behind that you didn't get to take with you. And that's what makes it so bittersweet sometimes.
It's bitter to have to sometimes face those conversations. It's bitter to have to drudge up names from the past in order to move forward in the future. But it really is something that once you've felt comfortable in saying, okay, this is where I feel I'm at now, I feel rooted in this kind of foundation, that is when you start vision casting for relationships, vision casting for yourself. And that's something that, as we wrap up today's episode, that's our topic of conversation next week, what it looks like to look forward through the year while also reflecting on the things that went right, went wrong.
Okay. Yeah, I think that I talk to my students about this a lot, and that is one of the challenges of being a conscious person is that largely you're required to be the bigger person. That's a lot of, and it's funny because, I'm not a Christian anymore, but I look to the stories of Jesus, who was a conscious leader. He was a compassionate, conscious leader that he taught in paradox and he taught in parable. So he always told stories and said, those with eyes to see and hear, let them hear. He didn't try to go and wake up and push people that weren't ready or showing signs of being aware and holding the burden of awareness. So part of it is that time is a part of it. And then the other thing is that it's both and. So that is one of the things about all of this. Whether you're a spiritual person or you're not, whether you believe in something after you deconstruct or not, it doesn't change the fact that you're still on a pathway of evolution. Evolution is a normal biological thing. Evolution means change. Your environment changes, you change, you grow up, you need different soil, you need different light, you need different whatever. If we're going to keep going on the plant parable, change is a normal part of life. And how relationships shift and morph over time is also a natural part of evolution. And I talk to my students about this a lot, which is called the grief and gratitude paradox. Like, you would not know grief if you weren't at some point grateful for something. But when it comes to the people that we're hoping to be able to maintain relationships with, especially at the holidays, they're like right in your face and you feel left out, is that the relationship is going to have to evolve to have any opportunity for roots, any opportunity at all. So I like the fact that we can roll into that more so in our last episode in this for the years before we move into 2026. But for those of you guys that are out there that might be feeling some of this stuff, my biggest question to you would be like, what do you want from this?
That's really important when it comes to relationship work. You need to know what you want, because you can't expect the other person to know what you want. So you need to know what you want before you can tell them what you want. And then they have to align with what they want. So it's a lot of work, but if it's something that you want to be a part of your life moving forward in this new version of you, or this true version of you, then you got to do the work.
Yeah. The thing I'd love to talk about on our next pod when we pick it up is how also, as a person that might be asked to do a lot more of the emotional heavy lifting and the be the bigger person and all of that stuff, is to understand, like, what are your non-negotiables about what you're not willing to drop just to be accepted? Like, what are you unwilling to do? Like, one of mine is I am unwilling to keep trying to explain myself to people who are committed to misunderstanding me. Like, there has to be a curiosity there.
And to put it in a way that I said earlier, we're talking about what are the things that you don't want to have to drop at the barrier of the door, or the metaphorical entry to this relationship or space. So that work begins with you. That work begins by looking inward and saying, okay, this is me. What about me are things that I will not give control to for anybody?
Yeah, I think that's a great place for us to kind of wrap up for today, don't you think?
Absolutely. There's a lot of things that go on, but the emotions are what make us human. Emotions are big. They are important. So listen to yourself. Be validated. We see you. We hear you. We know that these feelings are real.
Happy Yule, guys. We'll see you in our next episode. Ciao.